Greetings and welcome back to 303. We are in Senior English A, and our project now is to continue with two more characters from the general prologue of Chaucer. I'm with you on page 113 of your hymnals, and we are now going to meet the Sumner and the Partner. There's a reason why we're going to constitute these two as a unit together. In fact, we're told that they hang out together. We'll first meet the Sumner on page 113. Now let's write it down in your notes. Two observations about these two characters. One, these both are religious people. They are part of the religious church, okay? So that's significant. Two, the Sumner is a spiritual bounty hunter. Write that down in your notes. The Sumner is a spiritual bounty hunter. In other words, he goes out and he tries to find people who are in sin, and then he is going to bring them to the partner, his pal. And the partner will forgive those or pardon those sins. You can understand the title then of the character, okay? Now let's point out right away at 2B. This Sumner-Partner pair are very much going to be in the tradition of Juvenalian satire. Juvenalian, from the Roman writer Juvenal. That's the kind of satire, remember, that's harsh, mean. Horatian satire is kind of funny. You kind of laugh when it's made at you. It's not that mean. Juvenalian satire is straight up mean. This is mean satire. Why? The Sumner and the Partner are going to be, along with the Friar, the worst imaginable examples of religious people. The worst examples of religious people. Let's write that down. In other words, right away we're going to see Chaucer has serious problems with the Sumner and the Partner. Having said that, however, we will clearly want to know what kinds of stories or tales these two guys are going to tell. We will, put it in your notes, be studying the Partner's tale. Okay? We will study the Partner's tale. I should point out, a lot of the stories of Canterbury's Tales I couldn't teach in a high school classroom. I can teach them in my college lectures. I cannot teach them in a high school classroom because they are very controversial stories, as I've mentioned in other lectures already. Let's take a look now at the Sumner. I'm with you on page 113, line 641. Read along with me. Pay attention to the language. See how much of this you can understand on your own. By this point in the reading of the general prologue, you ought to have a pretty good indication of how well you know how to read this stuff. This is simply, we're just describing characters, aren't we? And we're going to write down a few things about the Sumner now. Let's go to work. There was a Sumner with us in the place who had a fire-red cherubinish face, for he had carbuncles. Whoa. Let's just pause right away. Clearly Chaucer doesn't like this character he's invented. Why? He tells us that he has huge zits, carbuncles, all over his face. That makes us, when we look at this, go, ooh. That's kind of grody. Again, back to an earlier phrase, we call this sometimes character tags. Characteristics about a character that the author gives to us that makes us think immediately about that. Our cook with his ulcer on his knee, and now here. Or remember, we will have that Miller has that mole on his nose with the hair sticking out. We got something very similar here. Huge white zits all over his face. His eyes were narrow. He was as hot and lecherous as a sparrow. Lecherous means he loves to hanky-panky. Now again, for your notes, we've already said this. For you to be a legitimate religious in the church of 1400, two things. One, no hanky-panky. That we call being celibate. You're not allowed to hanky-panky. You're not allowed to marry. It's against the rules. Two, you have to be poor, not rich. And so the Sumner and the Partner will violate both of these major rules. We're told the Sumner is lecherous like a sparrow. Line 645, Chaucer is in his genius here in the describing of this really scary guy. Black, scabby eyebrows he had, and a thin beard. Children were afraid when he appeared. When the Sumner shows up in a town, children run from him, which is a good indication this guy looks really scary. No quicksilver, lead ointments, tartar creams, borserac, no, nor brimstone, so it seems, could make a salve that had the power to bite, clean up, or cure his whelks of knobby white, or purge the pimples sitting on his cheeks. Whoa! So in other words, he's tried everything to try to get these zits off of his face. Nothing works for him. Garlic he loved. So not only is he scary to look at, but he stinks. He's got garlic always around him because maybe he thinks that's going to help him. And onions too, and leeks, and drinking strong wine till all was hazy. Then he would shout and gibber as if crazy, and wouldn't speak a word except in Latin when he was drunk. Such tags as he was pat in, he only had a few, save 2 or 3, that he had mugged up out of some decree. No wonder, for he heard them every day. And as you know, a man can teach a jay to call out Walter better than the Pope. In other words, what he says is, this guy's got no knowledge of true religion, but he knows a few words in Latin because the church did their mass in Latin, and of course, that's the holy language of the church of 1400. And he says he doesn't know very much Latin, but he'll speak the few phrases that he knows over and over again. Now, we can juxtapose this at 3a with the comments that were made earlier about the nun prioress. Remember, she spoke French, she just didn't speak the kind of French that they speak in France. That is to say, she really didn't know French. But that's an Horatian kind of piece of satire. In other words, Chaucer makes fun of the nun, but only in that kind of gentle way. Here, this is something far different. This is a nasty bit of Juvenalian satire. He knows a few Latin phrases, and then he gets stone blind drunk, and he likes to say these phrases over and over and over again. Notice, we'll continue. He was a gentle varlet. I'm at line 665. He was a gentle varlet and a kind one. No better fellow if you went to find one. Dark satire here. He says, this is the best nasty guy I've ever met, right? You can kind of get the joke there. In other words, he's a nasty guy. He's the best at being a nasty guy, right? He would allow, just for a quart of wine, the top of page 114, any good lad to keep a concubine, a 12-month, and dispense it altogether. Now again, let's just put it in our notes. This is significant. Chaucer is making a distinction between a religious like the parson and a religious like this Sumner. For example, the Sumner will, for a bit of money, allow a young kid to keep any kind of girlfriend that he wants to and live with her. Now let's point out, while today maybe living together or cohabitating is something that's a little bit more accepted, in 1400 that's a major no-no. You're not supposed to do it, it's against the rules of the church. But we're told the Sumner will let him get away with it as long as a little bit of money is to be made from it. We'll keep going on page 114. I'm at line 670. Yet he could pluck a finch to leave no feather, and if he found some rascal with a maid, he would instruct him not to be afraid in such a case of the archdeacon's curse, unless the rascal's skull were in his purse. For in his purse the punishment should be. Purse is the good money. Money is the good archdeacon's hell, said he. But well I know he lied in what he said. A curse should put a guilty man in dread, for curses kill as shriving brings salvation. Notice the point here being made that the Sumner was exploiting his position by making people pay him money so that way they could feel like somehow they were forgiven of their sins. Notice Chaucer will say at line 680, we should beware of excommunication. Thus, as he pleased, the man could bring duress on any young fellow in the diocese. He knew their secrets. They did what he said. He wore a garland set upon his head, large as the holy bush upon a stake, outside an alehouse, and he had a cake, a round one, which it was his joke to wield as if it were intended for a shield. Let's point out a couple of things about this Sumner. He would go up to the nicest guy in the diocese, the church, and say, I am going to have you excommunicated if you do not pay me and my pal, the partner, money. Now, what is excommunication? Let's write this down. Excommunication is what the church can threaten you with if you don't behave yourself. To be excommunicated means the following in 1400. Not only are you asked to leave the church, but because everybody in the community of the town is a part of the church. This means you have no friends. This means you do not get to live in the community, which means you are on your own, which ostensibly means you die. So to be excommunicated from the church is a major dog deal in Chaucer's day, and this Sumner can use the threat of excommunication if you don't pay up. A major religious thief. As if that's not wicked bad enough, Chaucer is going to continue now on page 114 with the second of our two religious hypocrites. He and notice the nasty satire, gentle pardoner rode together, a bird from Charing Cross of the same feather. In other words, he points out that the pardoner and the Sumner are pals. They're in cahoots together. They are going to use each other to make money off of the church. Bad guys. Just back from visiting the court of Rome, the pardoner loudly saying, "Come hither, love, come home." As they rode into town, they would begin to sing songs to certain girls, trying to entice them to come out to meet them. So in every way, this pardoner and this Sumner, bad guys. Again, let's just pause for a second at 2b and make an observation, though. This is Chaucer's way to try to attract you, interest you in reading their stories. The Sumner is going to tell a story. No, I don't teach it. The pardoner is going to tell a story. Interestingly, we will study the pardoner's story, okay? We will look at the pardoner's tale, all right? The Sumner sang deep seconds to this song, line 694. The Sumner sang deep seconds to this song. No trumpet ever sounded half so strong. This pardoner had hair as yellow as wax, hanging down smoothly like a hang of flax. In driblets fell his locks behind his head, down to his shoulders, which they overspread. Thinly they fell. And interesting, do you see this simile? Like rat tails, one by one. In other words, he has hair that hangs down, but it's like a rat's tail. Jot down really quickly for you at 2b. What does a simile, like having hair hanging down the back of your head, like rat's tails, describe for you? It's a compelling image. Good image, bad image. Most students will say it's not a very good image at all. He wore no hood upon his head for fun. The hood inside his wallet had been stowed. He aimed at riding in the latest mode. But for a little cap his head was bare, and he had bulging eyes, another simile, like a hare. So he has eyes that kind of stick out from his head. He'd sewed a holy relic on his cap. His wallet lay before him on his lap. Brimful of pardons come from Rome all hot. He had the same small voice a goat has got. His chin no beard had harbored nor would harbor. Smoother than ever chin was left by barber. He can't grow a beard. He can't grow a beard. I judge he was a gelding or a mare. As to his trade, from Berwick, I'm at the top of 115. From Berwick down to Ware, there was no partner of equal grace. For in his trunk he had a pillowcase, which he asserted was our Holy Lady's veil. He said he had a gobbet of the sail St. Peter had the time when he made bold to walk the waves till Jesus Christ took hold. He had a cross of metal set with stones, and in a glass a rubble of pig's bones. And with these relics, anytime he found some poor up-country parson to astound, on one short day and money down, he drew more than the parson in a month or two, and by his flatteries and his prevarication, lies, made monkeys of the priest and congregation. In other words, let's just pause for a moment and say, this is exactly the opposite of the parson who we met before. Completely the opposite. He shows up, he has sewn a special kind of patch on his hat or his garment to make him appear as if he's just come back from Rome, the city, of course, where the great Roman Catholic Church is going to have its major offices. And then he's going to say, I have these relics that have been blessed by the Pope, and I can forgive your sins if you will only pay me money. And in fact, Chaucer will say, I'm familiar with one time he did this in a community, and he completely made monkeys of the priest and congregation. Now, in our lectures on the partner here in a while, when we get to the partner's prologue especially, we will be making it clear that this is not a very good man at all for Chaucer. He sees him as a really bad guy. Why? Because he's inauthentic. Because he says one thing and he does something else. Notice your vocab word there. Prevarication, that is to say, a lie. If you prevaricate, then you do not tell the truth. And here we're told this partner is a tremendously gifted liar. Now, why would Chaucer be doing this? Couple of answers. Let's jot them in our notes really quickly. One reason he's going to do this is simply he is upset at the church's hypocrisy and he wants to see it changed. He wants to see it changed. Number two, another reason why he might be doing this is to begin the process of political religious education. In other words, he is going to tell people like these poor people who are made monkeys of by this partner, beware of religious people because sometimes they are inauthentic, especially when they start asking you for money. You probably shouldn't always trust them, that everything they say is legitimate. Notice Chaucer, though, how he ends his comments about the partner. But still, he says, at line 727, to do this partner justice first and last, in church he was a noble ecclesiast. Well, let's just pause for a moment and point out, Chaucer is willing to say about this partner, he is a great preacher. He is a tremendously gifted preacher. Even though he's a total crook, he's still a great ecclesiast, a great preacher. But best of all, he sang an offertory. For well he knew that when that song was sung, he'd have to preach and tune his honey tongue. And well he could win silver from the crowd. That's why he sang so merrily and so loud. So we have then a description of the partner and the Sumner together. Let's make some quick observations at level 2A. Major messages, themes. We have here in the Sumner and the partner, notice Chaucer waiting until the very end of the general prologue to give us our two most wicked, the partner later is going to call his own self vicious, examples of religious people who are inauthentic. Now, there's no doubt that after Martin Luther will nail his 95 treatises on the wall at the church in Wittenberg, you have the beginning of the protest movement that ultimately becomes called the Reformation to reform the church and the Protestant movement. No question, 150 years later, this kind of thing will be spoken of regularly. But when Chaucer is doing it, it's quite remarkable for its time. Chaucer is in many ways a prophet of the Catholic Church reform. And of course, there are going to be people who are very much going to support this kind of thing, and people who will say to him, Chaucer, how dare you attack the Holy Church itself? That again is what we call iconoclasm, to go after sacred cows, sacred institutions, and Chaucer is here clearly doing it. Of course, Chaucer is going to suggest you have to be very careful. Don't be made a monkey. Later the word will be a yokel. That is to say, a fool. Somebody who thinks that people are authentic when in fact they're not authentic at all. You cannot trust these kinds of people. They really don't have much affiliation with the church at all. The need for reform is obviously a major, major part of this. Let's jump to 3A really quickly. Is there for you a favorite movie, a favorite song, a favorite video game, where the ideas of that movie are really represented by this notion of attacking the inauthentic, making fun of or showing up somebody who is not legitimate at all? Are you at all familiar with undercover journalism? That is to say, someone walks in, for example, with a camera on their ball cap, but you can't see it. And they walk up to a mechanic and they say, I think I've got some problems with my car, can you fix it? And they go, oh yeah, we'll take a look at it. And then they come out and say, this is bad news, couple of thousand dollars we're going to need to fix on this. Really? I didn't know. I got no idea. Oh yeah, it's terrible. It's really bad. We're going to have to fix it. Do you have $2,000? Well, yeah. Can I have your credit card? We're going to run it now. Well, okay, so that's how we do it? We run the credit card even before you even get... Yep, that's how we do it. I've got to run the credit card now. And then, of course, the camera in the ball cap has been left in the garage without the mechanic knowing it was left there. And the mechanic walks in, laughs with his buddies, and says, it's funny how you can screw anybody with a credit card. And it's on camera. And then undercover journalism, like, for example, 60 Minutes or the old time 2020, or then they show this on TV. Question, when you watch something like that, and then you have to take your car in to have it worked on, and somebody walks out of the garage and says, I'm afraid we got some issues here. What's the first thing that comes through your mind? You're like, oh, dude, I watched this undercover documentary. You're scamming me. The problem, of course, is maybe the mechanic isn't scamming you. Maybe you really do have problems with your car, but in the back of your mind, the seed has already been planted. Let's write it down. The seed of doubt or skepticism. Can I legitimately believe what this person in authority is telling me, right? Now, by extension, any kid has dealt with the betrayal of an adult of some kind or another. An adult who said one thing but did something else, which again plants that seed in the back of the mind. Are all adults a little bit shady, right? They don't always tell the truth. Who can I trust? Who can I not trust? Let's just point out, and we'll say this when we meet Shakespeare later. Chaucer and Shakespeare are both genius at raising the question about trust. Who can you trust? Who can you legitimately trust? Can you trust people in authority? Are people in authority always right? And Chaucer is saying no. That is a significant moment in 1400. If for no other reason, and obviously we got a lot of them, Chaucer should be really respected as an amazing poet. This is certainly one of those reasons. Why? Because Chaucer is going to challenge us to challenge authority. If for no other reason, Chaucer is an important poet for us. Let's write that down. Chaucer is going to challenge us to challenge authority. Now,